In my first video, I installed VirtualBox and VMware. I said at the time that I installed them that I would do future videos showing how to use those tools to install operating systems. And this is basically the crux of what we're going to do to get a penetration testing lab set up. This video, I'm going to go through the setup process for Windows XP on VirtualBox. I use Windows XP because there are a lot of security tools that can be used to break into that system, and there are ways to block those tools, which we will use after we break in. So that said, that out of the way, let's get to the setup here. I've already started VirtualBox. So what we do is we just click New. The system will guide us through what we're going to do for our setup. What are we going to call it? Well, let's be unoriginal. Let's call it Windows XP. The VirtualBox application will auto-detect from that name that, hey, we're going to install Windows, and by golly, it's Windows XP. I'm not going to change that. I'm going to go ahead and say next. While I'm here, I do want to point out there is this expert mode, which puts all of the things we're about to do onto a single screen. If you've used VirtualBox before or after you've used it a while and gotten used to it, you probably want to do the expert mode. But for now, for this first time setup for this video, we're not going to use it. We're going to do the guided mode, so we'll say next. How much memory do you want to give the system? Well, that depends on what you've got. I have the luxury of having a 32 gig laptop here, so I like to give plenty of memory. Since I'm doing a 32-bit Windows XP, 3 gig of memory is the most we can give it. I'm going to go ahead and just give it 2 gig, which is more than enough to set things up and get the system running. So we'll say next after that. What hard disk are you going to do? Your options: do not add a virtual hard disk. You can use this for cases where you want to set up the hard disk later. I've never done a setup where I didn't set a virtual hard disk, but that is an option. Create a virtual hard disk now. That's what we're going to do. We're going to set up a new simulated hard drive for this operating system install. And then the last option is use an existing virtual hard disk file. That's what you use if you want to take a hard drive a simulated hard drive you've already set up and reuse it. This first, do not add, and this last, use existing, I rarely use, so I can't give good advice for when to use them. I'm just going to create a hard disk now. We'll do create. The system will ask you what kind of hard disk you want to use. I've never seen a reason to change from the default. We're going to stick with that. You may want to research it. There may be a good reason to choose something else, but certainly not anything I know about, so I'm just going to say next. The next step, we're asked about storage on the physical hard disk. Do you want to set up a fixed size disk where right now, as we're creating it, the entire drive is set up for that size? You'll get a 10 gig, 20 gig, however big file. Or do you want to use dynamically allocated, where it's a file on the hard drive that grows as it needs to grow? I always use dynamically allocated. There's probably a good argument for fixed size, maybe related to some small performance benefit, but I don't ever use it, so I can't make a recommendation on that. Again, I go with the default dynamically allocated. Now we're told, name your virtual drive and set its size. The recommendation from VirtualBox is 10 gig. That should be plenty. Windows XP is not that big a operating system. which means we should have plenty of room left over. I'm going to make a little change here just because I've got the hard drive space. I'm going to go ahead and do 20 gig. Since it's dynamically allocated, the file space is not going to be that much to start with, and it gives us a little room to grow if we need it. We'll say create. We'll come to the system, and here we are ready to go. So there are settings we can get into to change things up, and I'm going to go in there because there's something else we do need to do. The storage, we've got our Windows simulated hard drive that we just set up. We don't have a CD set up, and I'm going to tell the system to do that. We're going to use the optical drive. We're going to take a break here because I'm not sure what my setup is. I'm going to stop the video, play around, see which setting I need to use for my optical drive, and then I'll be back. Now that I've found the settings I need, I'm back, and we're going to go look at a couple more things that need to be changed. Okay. We have storage, we have our virtual hard drive, but we also need a bootable CD that we can use as media for getting this system up and running the first time. So I'm going to choose that. I've already been into the system and chosen it. So my second drive in this virtual system will be a CD-ROM that is a bootable Windows XP Pro 32-bit Service Pack 3, which is what we're going for. The other thing I'm going to change is the network. By default, VirtualBox sets up your network as NAT, and instead what I want is bridged, so that this virtual machine has an address on the same network that my host is on. You don't have to do this. There are ways to access using the host to the virtual machines, but it's easier just to do a bridged adapter so that you've got a dedicated IP address that you can go to. So those out of the way, we'll say OK to this. We'll get ready to start the system. Now before I start, I want to point out that much like a real system, when this virtual machine starts, it's not going to have an operating system, so we have to tell it to boot off the CD. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hit start. I'm going to click inside the window for the machine, and I'm going to hit F12, which is the control key for the virtual BIOS that will allow me to tell the system to boot off the CD. So here goes with that. Now I've got my temporary boot selection. I say boot off the CD, and here we go. Windows starts up. It does loading of the file systems it needs, the files that it needs, and drivers that would normally be used to access the hardware on a real system. In just a moment, the system's going to ask me where to install, so I'm going to tell it to use that whole hard drive that we've got. I'll just hit enter, tell the system to format it using NTFS, and away we go. The setup does the format. It takes 20 or 30 seconds to do this part, and after this, the virtual machine will start loading files off of the CD onto the virtual hard drive. So you'll see this copying files, getting things set up, getting things in place. It's pretty quick. It doesn't take all that long. It's not horrible to have to wait through that. But after it does this and does a reboot, the actual setup happens. It's all automatic. We don't have to tell the system anything. But once this reboot happens, I'm going to stop the video until the install is done, because there's nothing really going on and you don't want to have to listen to me fill the time for the 10 minutes or so it takes. So here goes the Windows XP setup. There we go. Now we get the actual install running. And we've got to wait for it. It says 39 minutes. I know from doing this before it's really more like 8 or 10 minutes. But because of how long it takes and because there's nothing interesting happening, we're just waiting for the system to run. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, come back once things are done when I'm on my final reboot and getting the system up and running so that there's something actually to see and do. So pause here and I'll be back. Now that the setup is nearly done, we'll go through some of the settings here. We have our language options. We'll stick with the default. Make up an organization, computer name, make up a computer name, administrator password. Set something in there so I know what that is. Date and time is correct. I do need to set my time zone. I am Central Time here. And now we wait some more for a few more things to finish, and I'll be back after another break. The setup is nearly finished, so we'll start back up here. While I had the recording off, the Windows XP setup asked me for the workgroup name. I set it to home. I don't think that matters for anything, but I want to provide that information in case anybody's watching and doesn't know how to set that for their own system. Now we're to the point where the system is nearly done installing. Windows is telling us it's going to automatically set our screen resolution. We'll accept what it is. The system's going to finish booting up. After Windows is up and running, there's just a couple other things we want to do to make this installation complete and get things the way we want them, get everything running right. So we'll wait a few moments for the final boot up to complete so that I can do these last changes. While waiting, I guess I should tell you what we've got to do. There are tools that come with VirtualBox. There we go. I'm going to be quiet because of the volume of the virtual machine, so give me a moment to set these up. As I said during the initial setup, we're not going to turn on automatic updates because we want to stay at Service Pack 3, which is the version of XP that I have loaded as a Service Pack 3 installation. So we're going to leave automatic updates turned off. Yes, the system will connect through a network, so we'll leave that at the default and skip on ahead. No, I don't want to register with Microsoft right now. We can do that later if we want to do it. And then we create a user account for the system. Now, as I was saying, the VirtualBox tool comes with some drivers that you want to install in your virtual machine to do the setup, to get everything running as well as it can within the virtual machine. So let's click on the background here, get rid of the start menu. Windows is going to throw up a couple of little balloons here telling me my antivirus is not here. I know that. It's telling me I can have a tour of Windows XP if I want. I know about that. I'm going to skip it. And it's recommending again that I turn on auto update. I'm just going to close that. That's basically it for the Windows XP install. But there are, as I said, a couple of things left to do still. We're going to go up to the VirtualBox Devices menu, and we're going to choose this option that says Insert Guest Editions CD Image. That will immediately almost immediately pop up in the Windows Guest in the virtual machine that there's a setup of tools to do. So let's choose Next on that, accept the default location, and do Start Menu Entries and Install. Just so you see this, it says Direct 3D support. I know from having tried this before, you have to be in Windows Safe Mode to install that. I'm not in Safe Mode, so I'm going to skip that. All that does is allow the virtual machine to access the graphics accelerator of the host. We don't need that for what we're doing, so I'm going to skip that. We're going to do the install though. Let the guest editions install. You'll hear a couple of beeps as things are recognized by Windows, and we'll do another reboot. This will be quick. It'll shut down. The virtual machine will start back up. We'll get into Windows, and then that's it. We're set up. We're ready with Windows. So we've got our machine the way we want it. You don't have to change the resolution, but I like to. Tour of Windows XP again. We'll say we don't care about that. I'm going to right click and go to Properties. Get rid of the antivirus warning. I believe I'll get an auto updates warning as well. But I'm going to go to Settings. I'm going to set this to 1024 by 768. I just like to have a little bit more screen real estate in the virtual machine to play around with. So everything is set up and running for how we need it right now. In a future video, I'm going to actually install some Windows software that we're going to attack with the security pen testing tools that I'm going to install in a different future Windows video. So that's it for now. I'll close this video out and post it. If you have any questions about what I did, what VirtualBox does, how to do the setup, feel free to ask in the comments. I will do my best to help out anybody who wants to try to set this up. And soon we will start installing penetration testing tools and start attacking systems. I do have a couple of more guest systems or virtual systems to set up, but those shouldn't take that long. Then we'll get on to doing the fun stuff that everybody comes here for. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have questions.